Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the crime thriller films from 2023, titled Sharper. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie begins with Tom, the owner of a used bookstore in New York City. On that particular day, a young PhD student named Sandra enters the bookshop to find the perfect birthday gift for her professor. Her passion for books catches the eye of the charming owner, Tom, a fellow book lover, who can't help but strike up a conversation with her. While totaling the purchase, Tom asks Sandra out on a date, but to his disappointment, she refuses with a gentle smile, revealing that she likes being single. Respecting Sandra's decision, Tom tries to swipe her card for payment, only to have it repeatedly declined, so the woman has to go back empty-handed. In a grand gesture of kindness, he hands her the book and urges her to return and pay for it whenever she can. Later in the evening, when Tom is closing his store, he is approached by Sandra, who pays for the book, before agreeing to go on a date with him. The two spend quite a great time at a Japanese restaurant. It turns out that Tom pursued his career as a writer, but his mom's death and his war with depression made him give up his passion, and find solace in the walls of a bookstore. Sandra's story is quite heart-wrenching, as she and her brother had to hop from one foster family to the next after their parents' death. Ever since Sandra read Jane Eyre's novel from the novel collection of one of her foster parents, she fell in love with the books. The uncanny resemblance between the personalities of the two book readers sparks a love story that continues until everything changes in a few days. Tom's visit to Sandra's house takes an unexpected turn when one night, they're interrupted by a relentless thudding at the door. According to Sandra, it's her brother Jason, who's in desperate need of cash to settle a drug debt. She also reveals to Tom how Jason got unlucky with the foster homes. Some of the houses he was put in were a nightmare, making him the person he is today. Despite seeing her brother's violent attitude, Tom keeps dating Sandra, and even comforts her when she needs it. It has been a couple of weeks since their first date, and yet their relationship is as exciting as before. One night, Tom reveals to Sandra that he doesn't get along with his father, who thinks his son is a disappointment to him. Moreover, his father has a new wife, making it quite uncomfortable for Tom to live at their house. Everything seems to go perfectly until one day, Tom visits Sandra's place only to find her distressed, sitting alone in her room. It turns out that her brother is in serious trouble, having been brutally beaten by a group of thugs to whom he owed money. They have threatened to return and finish him off if he doesn't pay up in 4 days. Tom believes that nothing can stop the incoming storm of thugs unless they pay them off. As the amount is $350,000, Sandra doesn't think that paying the debt is a practical option. Tom then reveals about his father's hedge fund, and that he has the money in his bank account. He offers his help, but Sandra refuses to accept such a hefty amount from a stranger. However, in Tom's eyes, the best thing that has ever happened to him is his only true love, Sandra, and he will do anything to protect her. With no option left, Sandra decides to take the favor, only to pay it back one day, no matter how long it takes. After promising to meet Tom that evening, Sandra departs to deliver the money. Unfortunately that evening, when Tom waits for Sandra at the restaurant where they had their first date, she doesn't show up. She even disappears from her apartment, never to come back again, leaving Tom distressed.
Sandra! Sandra!
The scene then switches to Sandra, where we finally get to see her for who she really is. The movie flashes back to when Sandra visits her parole officer at a bar a few weeks earlier before she meets Tom. It turns out that the seemingly cute and innocent Sandra is none other than a parolee with a long criminal history. The parole officer begins to inquire Sandra about her job, to which she replies that she has been working at Starbucks. But it doesn't take long for her lie to unravel, when the astute officer uncovers that she hasn't been to work in a month. As getting fired from the job violates the parole agreement, and she admits that she smoked weed the night before, the officer has no choice but to arrest her. Just then, an affluent man named Max approaches, and bribes the officer to let Sandra go. In addition to $400, Max offers his Rolex, but the lady officer over-efficiently denies accepting the bribe. As Max leaves, the officer finally realizes that she has made a big mistake by refusing that hefty amount of money. The lady invites the man to have a talk, and in the end, Max agrees to give his Rolex to the parole officer, leaving Sandra in utter confusion. After the officer leaves happily with her watch, Max reveals that it was just a copy he used to pull off his trick. He offers Sandra $1,000 as her cut, and the cunning man finally manages to persuade her to hear his plan. He takes her to an apartment, and offers her a place to sleep only if she agrees to work for him. The following day, Sandra wakes up to find Max making breakfast in the kitchen. Starting a conversation about movies, the man gives Sandra the impression that he loves Titanic, but the reality is he doesn't watch any films at all. This is the trick they will be playing with other people to get their money. Working as a con artist, Sandra will lure rich men by showing them the personality they want in their partners. It is Max's responsibility to gather all necessary information about their target, making it easy for Sandra to pull off the theft. But unlike Max's expectations, he finds that Sandra spends that night smoking weed instead of focusing on her plan. In a fit of rage, he throws her out of the apartment, and even from their elaborate scheme. When Sandra begs for pardon, Max finally agrees to let her in, only if she remains clean throughout the mission. The following day brings a lot of work for Sandra, as she has to learn and memorize Tom's favorite books, quotes, and even writers. Not only does she has to understand Tom's interests, but she also has to create a whole new persona for herself. Everything she told Tom, from her education to her family background, was a total fabrication. Practicing each sentence required her days of cramming and using brain-boosting techniques to grasp every detail, all in the name of winning Tom's heart. After days of working hard, Max takes Sandra to dinner, and asks her to seduce the man sitting on the counter. Being a pro, Sandra only takes a few minutes to pull off her seducing tricks to get to the man's room. But just as they're about to get intimate,
Bitch! Don't you think I fucking knew it? I knew you were going. Jesus Christ! Hey!
Max storms into the room, taking on the persona of Sandra's ex-boyfriend and accusing her of infidelity. Saying that she needs to calm him down, Sandra instructs the man to wait in the lobby for a few minutes. Just as the man leaves in a hurry, Max switches to his true identity, and begins to look for cash or other valuables. After realizing that Sandra has mastered the conning skills, Max starts the game they have been planning for weeks. The movie then switches to Max, back to the day before his partnership with Sandra. He visits his mother at a lavish apartment, and here we learn that Max's mother, Madeline, has married a man named Richard, a famous billionaire who loves his wife to his very core and can't tolerate someone hurting her. However, Max never leaves an opportunity to upset his mother by calling the man old. Max, who appears drunk and belligerent, convinces Madeline to allow him to stay at Richard's apartment for a moment. The next day, when Madeline and Richard get home, they find Max being arrested for soliciting drugs from an undercover police officer. Not wanting things to get worse, Richard takes out $1,000 and is about to give it to the undercover police officer. However, Max's mom realizes that Max called a fake cop on himself and tried to get money from Richard, so Max and his friend finally admit what they were trying to do. Madeline then slaps Max in the face for always making her look bad in front of Richard, and forces Max to leave the apartment. However, the mother still visits him the other day to say sorry, and only to reveal something beyond our expectations. It turns out that Madeline is none other than Max's girlfriend, who works with him to trick the billionaire Richard. She tells Max that Richard wants to meet him in his office to discuss their issue. The following day, Max arrives at the office to meet Richard, who has just finished his medical checkup. But to our surprise once again, they encounter Tom, who turns out to be Richard's son. At this point, he hasn't yet met Sandra.
See you around, Dad.
Richard then reveals his clashes with Tom. It turns out that he is upset with Tom for not taking an interest in the business empire after his mother died. Instead of demanding luxurious items, the only son of a business tycoon asked for a bookstore, so he could make a living doing what he enjoys. After sharing his problems, Richard finally comes to the point. Max's rude behavior towards his mom has forced Richard to offer him a lot of money in exchange for his disappearance from Madeline's life. For $60,000 a month, and a year's upfront salary, Max agrees to leave his so-called mother, never to return again. Flush with cash, Max walks into the bar, where his partners in crime, Madeline, and the fake cop, are eagerly waiting to toast the triumphant success of their con job. Their next plan is to run away from the city as far as possible, but for this, Madeline needs to return to her apartment to pick up some stuff. But as the sun rises, Max calls Madeline, only to learn that she doesn't want to run away with him. As she has won Richard's heart, she has gotten access to his unlimited wealth, which is more than what Max gets from Richard. In addition to deceiving her own crime partner, Madeline has called the cops on him. Betrayed and cornered, Max slams the phone shut, his heart racing with fear as he scrambles to make a hasty getaway. The next scene focuses on Madeline. After a few weeks, Richard dies due to a prolonged illness. We know that she's only faking tears, before stepping outside of her room to meet with others. Richard's lawyer then informs Madeline and Tom that Richard left his property, assets, shares, stocks, and remaining $9.2 billion for Madeline alone. Due to Richard's misgivings about Tom after the incident with Sandra, Tom only gets the trust that will allow him to hold on to his bookstore. He's only been named chairman of Richard's foundation, while Madeline is a trustee. To give Tom the impression that she doesn't want the money, Madeline apologizes to him again and again, but deep down, she is more than excited to become the sole owner of the entire business. It seems like Tom trusts his stepmother, and doesn't doubt her for a second. With her newfound wealth, Madeline begins to live a lavish life on her own, shopping at high-end stores. Until one day, Tom shows up with Sandra's case. He has asked Braddock, a friend of his father, to help him find the woman who committed the theft. With all the information he has, Braddock thinks that Sandra can't do this kind of con alone, which means there are more than one person behind this elaborate scheme. The following day, Madeline tries to talk Tom out of pursuing Sandra's case. By telling him that he doesn't care that the money was stolen, and that all he wants to do is meet Sandra, Madeline manages to manipulate Tom into forgetting about the bad girl. Although Tom stopped his men from looking for Sandra, it turns out that they followed the last lead, and somehow found her. After seeing her in a worn-out condition in their apartment, Tom tells his men that it's true that Sandra wasn't working alone. It turns out that Sandra's accomplice, whom we knew as Max, betrayed her and left her with nothing. According to Sandra, the guy taught her everything about Tom, and he had some sort of connection with Tom's family. As Sandra regrets her decisions, Tom can't help but allow her to stay here until she is recovered. Hearing this, Madeline refuses because they cannot trust a junkie like her, but Tom insists. In order to settle things with Sandra, Madeline visits her in her room, and it turns out that Sandra knows everything about Madeline from Max. Sandra wants to make things right, and is now ready to confess Madeline's crimes. When Madeline insists on making a deal, Sandra agrees to keep her disguise, only if she brings the person who betrayed her. Madeline doesn't know where Max is, but she has no choice except to call him again and again.
I mean, what the fuck did you tell her? Call me.
After a few stressful days of waiting for Max to answer her voicemails, Madeline finally succeeds in getting in touch with Max, who later agrees to help her once again. Pretending to take Sandra for a walk, Madeline takes her out of the apartment in order to arrange a meeting with Max. Sandra is furious to see the man who betrayed her, but before she can make him apologize, two cars show up unexpectedly. It turns out to be Tom and his men, and Tom finally witnesses his stepmother's real face. Tom and Braddock arrive to confirm Tom's suspicions that the three had been working together. But instead of repenting of her sins, Madeline says that they can't do anything since all of Richard's assets now belongs to her. During this heated argument, Tom grabs Braddock's gun out of the blue and is about to shoot Madeline for ruining his life. Sandra stops this from happening, but Madeline gets the gun thrown at her, so she picks it up and threatens everyone. Frustrated, Tom grabs the pistol in Madeline's hand and makes her pull the trigger, resulting in his demise. As a result, Tom's men believe that Madeline was the killer, and is about to report this to the police. Madeline gets panicked since she doesn't want to spend the rest of her life in jail. Desperate to avoid prison, she immediately calls her lawyer, and gets her inheritance transferred to Richard's foundation, earning a way out of this trouble. Afterwards, Braddock escorts the three of them, where Sandra boards the plane with Madeline and Max. Madeline reminds Max that she will retain control of the money, since Tom is dead, and she is the trustee of Richard's foundation. Hearing that they still talk about money after Tom's dead, Sandra excuses herself to the bathroom. However, Madeline and Max's suspicions are aroused, when they notice that the stain on Madeline's sleeve is not real, meaning Tom is still alive. Madeline suspects Max is behind this, but Max denies it, and that's when she realizes Sandra has been in the restroom for some time. As she looks inside the bathroom, she witnesses that Sandra is already gone. We now move to the last part, where the true nature of the scheme is revealed. It turns out that Sandra actually fell in love with Tom, and after Richard's death, she decided to confess everything she had planned with Madeline and Max. With Sandra's assistance, Tom managed to make his own team with Braddock, and others to pull off the entire play with great sophistication. The meeting between Sandra and Max was planned, and with the conning skills being taught, Sandra managed to trick both of her masters. Since Tom is still alive, he maintains control over the foundation and the money. The movie ends with the con artists getting their payment for their con project, helping Tom retrieve his unlimited fortune, and leaving him with his cozy bookstore away from all the negativity in his life. Okay guys, that's all the recap of Sharper 2023. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.